Ja? Še enkrat, lepo pozdravljeni, dobrodošli v hiši Evropske unije v Ljubljani na novinarski konferenci ob koncu obiska delegacije odbora parlamenta za pravosodje, notranje zadeve in državljanske svoboščine. Kot verjetno veste, so se članice in člani odbora v zadnjih 3 dneh sestali s predstavniki državnih institucij, civilne družbe, nevladnih organizacij in medijev. Preden dam besedo vodji delegacije, gospe Sophie Veld, torej poslanka politične skupine Renew Europe iz Nizozemske, samo še nekaj tehničnih navodil za vas, dragi predstavniki medijev. Torej, po njeni izjavi boste imeli možnost zastaviti vprašanje. Prosim, da dvignete roko, ko vas povabim k mikrofonu, pridete k mikrofonu, si snamete masko, se predstavite in zastavite vprašanje. Danes nas spremljajo tudi v neposrednem prenosu novinarji iz Evrope, ki jih prav tako vabim, da postavijo svoje vprašanje preko spletne aplikacije Slido. Prosim, da se predstavijo in vprašanje zastavijo v slovenskem ali angleškem jeziku. V teh 2 jezikih imamo namreč zagotovljeno tolmačenje. Toliko z moje strani, zdaj pa predajam besedo gospe Veld. Izvolite.
Okay, thank you very much and good afternoon, everybody. I have seen some of you near our delegation over the last couple of days. I will start by introducing the members of the delegation. Mrs. Toms from the EPP group, whom you probably know, she's from here. Mr. Engerer from the S&D group from Malta, Mrs. Strik from the Greens group from the Netherlands, Mrs. Kanko from the ECR group from Belgium, Mr. Fest from the ID group from Germany, and Mr. Pesca, who's actually here on behalf of the Budget Control Committee from the Czech Republic. Right, okay. There was another member who had to leave yesterday afternoon, and that was Mr. Arvanitis from Greece, from the left group. So now you know all the faces, and if you have specific questions, you know whom to approach. I think before I make a statement, I would like to make clear what this trip was about and what it was not about. As you probably know, it was a mission, as we call it, of the Democracy, Rule of Law and Fundamental Rights Monitoring Group of the European Parliament, and I emphasize monitoring group. It's not a tribunal. We are not a court of justice. We do monitoring, which is an ongoing exercise. It's not a one-off. It's not one visit and then we issue a verdict. It's part of an ongoing exercise, and I think that is it's important to keep that in mind. I think when it comes, you know what the reasons are why we decided to come here and to start monitoring Slovenia. You also know that there have been earlier online sessions. Due to COVID, we were unable to travel, so now we're very happy to be here and also enjoy a little bit beautiful Ljubljana. But you know that this has started at an earlier stage, and there were concerns in particular over media freedom or media pluralism, and there have been some brief exchanges with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Culture, but they were very, very short. About the program, we've had a very full 3-day program, and let me start by saying that we had wished to meet with the Prime Minister and some of the ministers. Unfortunately, they were not available. I hope that sometime in the future we will have an opportunity for an exchange, because it would have been very important to hear their views. However, we've had meetings with a very wide range of actors. We did meet with the Secretary of State from the cabinet of Mr. Janša, the Secretary of State for Justice, from the Minister of Justice. We've met with journalists, NGOs, the Ombudsman, the Court of Auditors, the Anti-Corruption Commission. We've met with the public television. We've met with a very, very, very wide range of actors. This morning we were in Parliament. We've met with heads of the parliamentary committees, with the President of Parliament, with the President and the Vice President of the National Council. So we've really tried to get as broad a picture as possible. Of course, we'll go back to Brussels now, to the European Parliament, and start writing down our findings and eventual conclusions. So whatever I say is preliminary. However, I think there's an echo now. I think, okay, maybe somebody can address the echo. Maybe it's this. There are a couple of observations to be made. One observation is that the public institutions, the public bodies work well. That is one thing. So that we have concluded, which is very reassuring. We also conclude, however, that there are a couple of issues. One that has really struck us all is the, let me summarize it by saying that the tone of the public debate. It's also very striking that members of the government are also engaging in a kind of debate which I think is unfitting for a civilized and democratic society. That's one thing. A second thing is, following on from this, I think that kind of debate leads to a climate of distrust, hostility and intimidation, and what I find very worrying is that it sows doubt and distrust about the public institutions, but also between the public institutions. Then another element here, which is reason for concern, is that we see in a number of cases that, let's say, decisions to make appointments or to grant funds, budget, are being delayed, held up, stalled, and they have to be fought in court. I'm referring in particular to the funding of the STA, the press agency, and this is something we feel needs to be addressed urgently, because I think it should not be that even when a favourable court ruling comes, that STA has gone under. Then, of course, as members of the European Parliament, we are very concerned about the delayed nomination of the delegated prosecutors to the EPPO, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and we also took note of the delay in the appointment of prosecutors here in Slovenia itself. I think, coming back to there's one third element, and then I'll come back to the initial findings. We also, I mean, sometimes the hate speech and the heated tone of the debate actually ends up in downright harassment or intimidation, excessive use of libel suits, criminal charges, and what have you. We have taken note with concern of the letter signed by 4 public bodies: the Court of Auditors, the Ombudsman, the Data Protection Authority, and the Corruption Commissioner, who are pointing at the risk of, let's say, pressure and possible threats to their independence. That is, I think, a very worrying signal. So I think the first finding I mentioned, namely that the institutions work well, that is a very important conclusion. But I think there is also sufficient reason for concern. If you see how pressure on public bodies is growing, how pressure on the media are growing, on journalists are growing, and all in all you may end up with a kind of climate wherein the media and the democratic institutions do not function properly anymore. Not because they're not, they don't have the right legal base or something like that, but simply because in a climate where the distrust to and fro has risen to levels where public bodies do not work together anymore in the interest of the citizens, that is, I think, very, very worrying. I think what also struck us, but maybe the others will want to say something about that, is the polarization is very much as if the population is divided in two camps, whereas I think there's only one Slovenia. There's one Slovenia and there's only one Slovenian people. And you may have different views, and you may like each other, you may not like each other. I mean, that's normal. But this degree of division in a population whereby it seems that it becomes a dialogue of the deaf is worrying. And I do believe that the tone of the debate is not harmless and it's not innocent. And we have seen in other countries how it can lead to an erosion of trust in the democratic institutions and even an attack on the democratic institutions in the end. We're not there. I make that very clear. We're not there. One last remark maybe on specific concerns. Is I think the fact that the ruling by decree, we know that there is debate here in court cases about whether there's sufficient legal basis for the decrees. That is not the issue, I think, but there is a question whether at this point in the pandemic it is necessary to continue to govern by decree. Okay, I think I've mentioned some of our main findings and main concerns. So. The institutions are functioning well. We are concerned about the tone of the debate, harassment and intimidation, and using the squeezing budgets and capacity in order to weaken certain institutions. That is very worrying, in particular as they are compound. We do feel that the STA should be funded immediately. We also strongly urge those responsible to nominate the delegated prosecutors to EPO. We also strongly urge to no longer delay the appointments of the prosecutors here in Slovenia, the national prosecutors. And I think finally it was also pointed out to us that there is an urgent need for legislative reforms, for example, the media law. I understand that this has been a problem, not just for the last year and a half, but for years, if not decades. That I would also like to underline, that the whole idea that problems have only started a year and a half ago. I think there have been problems before, and I'm expressing myself carefully here because there were lots of references to the past and all the debates that we had. But I do think that everybody or many people mentioned that there is a clear intensification of issues. I think that is what I would like to say by way of introductory remarks. I'm open to questions, and if you have any specific questions to any of my colleagues, please indicate so.
Hvala lepa. Vabim novinarje, da zastavijo vprašanje. Imamo kakšnega kandidata tukaj? Ja? Izvolite.
Hello, I'm Luka Gorenjec, journalist from television Nova 24, and my question is, why were the media who have been targeted by left-wing political parties not asked about their opinions about the media situation in Slovenia, and why was the Slovenian Ministry of Culture not allowed to record the meeting? Thank you.
Okay, 2 questions. First of all, we have made a program that was balanced. We've heard all sorts of views, and I frankly do not accept the notion that there are 2 Slovenias and both sides be heard. It's not a football match. We've had a very wide range of views. We've been talking to all sorts of journalists who were all expressing different views in different ways. So I think we've had a very balanced view of what's going on. I frankly, for me, if a journalist is targeted, if a journalist is threatened, if a journalist is attacked, for me personally, it doesn't matter whether he's left-wing, right-wing, center, progressive, conservative. It is an attack on the free media, full stop. it doesn't really matter what side somebody belongs to. And I think this, and this is also a very personal message, this idea of a society which is divided in two camps, I think is not only a wrong notion, it's a dangerous notion. Secondly, why no record? They didn't actually ask to record, they asked a copy of the recordings. We have no recordings because they're in camera sessions, because that is the formula of these fact-finding missions. We have, this is part of the work of the permanent democracy, rule of law and fundamental rights working group. Part of our sessions are in camera, mostly actually. We also have some public sessions, but they are rare. It's just the way we work. And the only reason that we said no is that we don't want to make an exception, and we hold no recordings. We take notes ourselves. So, and I found it a bit, I don't think that should have been a stumbling block for meeting up, quite frankly, because I also don't see, if we trust each other, it was an exchange of view. There was no, as I said, it's not a tribunal. So it was a bit unfortunate. And I do hope that in the future we will have the opportunity for an exchange of views with those members of the government that we didn't get to see this time.
Hvala lepa. Še kakšno vprašanje morda iz dvorane? Ja, izvolite.
Hello, I'm Andrej Sekulović from Demokracija magazine, and I would like to ask you, since you wanted the whole picture of the situation in Slovenia, how come that you mostly invited only left-wing journalists and NGOs to talk with you? Thank you.
Look, I think I've just answered to that question. We did not only invite left-wing NGOs and journalists. We've heard all sorts of views. I think for me one of the most interesting sessions, I think, was with three academic professors who were, let's say, nominally belonging to different camps, but then we got into a very interesting debate where it turned out that there's a lot more nuance in views than just left and right. There are more flavors than left and right, and we have heard, if you care, left-wing journalists, right-wing journalists, and we've had a pretty complete picture.
Metka, izvoli, potem pa prejdemo še na nekaj vprašanj iz slajda. Prosim.
Hello, Metka Mar, Pop TV. I have two questions actually. I didn't understand what will actually the outcome right now be, what will be the result of these meetings, and second of all, I don't know how much you are acquainted with what was going on Twitter yesterday. You wanted to meet with the Prime Minister, he kind of answered you on Twitter. How do you comment on that? How do you see that?
As to your first question, what will happen next? We will go back to Brussels, and I will do a written report to the Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs Committee that we are a part of. As the chair of this permanent monitoring group, I report back to that, let's say, Justice and Home Affairs Committee regularly. That report will cover not just this mission, but also our missions to Slovakia, Bulgaria, and some other monitoring exercises that we have done over the last 3 months or so. And then we'll see. As you know, of course I cannot speak. I cannot preempt any decisions or any actions that Parliament might wish to take. But I would say we report back. We will continue to monitor. With, on the basis of sources we can consult, people we can speak to, and then we will just see how it develops. This is why I emphasized very much at the start, this is not a tribunal, it's also not some sort of exercise that should lead to decisions or sanctions or something like that. It's really literally this, monitoring, and I do believe that as we have found that the institutions work well, I think we all agree on that. I do believe that there is sufficient reason to continue the monitoring exercise, but this is not, there's some people who feel that this monitoring exercise means that all of a sudden you're a defendant in a court case or something like that. I mean, we have with the monitoring group, we have also had sessions on Belgium, on Spain, on other countries on the basis of specific incidents or concerns. So we do feel that there is reason to continue monitoring. But we'll see about further steps. I see no further steps for the time being. The second question about the Twitter exchange, I have very little to say to that because it wasn't part of our monitoring exercise. People can exchange on Twitter whatever they like. I have said what I've had to say about the tone of the public debate, whereby I do feel, and this is a more general remark, those who are in power, and if you're in government, you're in power, you have a special responsibility for, first of all, the tone of the debate, making sure that you actually strengthen the trust in democratic institutions rather than weaken that trust. I think you also have to be aware, if you're in power, in government, that if you attack individuals, that you always attack them, from a position of power to somebody who is in a weaker position. But I have no remarks about the Twitter exchange last night.
Hvala lepa. Prejeli smo tudi vprašanje preko aplikacije Slido. Pošilja ga novinarka Libe Politico. Prebrala ga bom v izvirniku, torej v angleškem jeziku. I will read it in English. Do you think other EU institutions, like Commission and the Council, should take any steps when it comes to Slovenia?
I think I've just answered that question. I would again. I cannot preempt what we're going to say after we've had our consultations. I would say at this moment, the institutions work. I can also not see that there is a systematic destruction of the democratic institutions as we see in some other countries. I don't need to specify where, but I do see that this climate of extreme polarization, an extremely hated tone of the debate, compared with elements like starving the budget of the STA, not nominating prosecutors, etc. If you combine those things, then I do think there is reason to continue to monitor.
Imamo še kakšno vprašanje tukaj? Aha, gospod Škerl? Ja, eno.
Uroš Kramberger for Dnevnik newspaper. Did you address in your discussions the pushbacks on the southern border with Croatia?
That has been addressed in the questions. I think it's one of those issues where concerns remain. I also have to say, we've heard a lot of things which are concerning, but I think you have to look at the scope of our exercise. Because if I look at pushbacks, the way asylum seekers are treated, or data protection violations, or other, those are issues that exist everywhere. And I think we have a general problem with the fact that that member states are doing these things, but also that the Commission is extremely weak in enforcing EU law. I mean, that's a more general problem. But that is not. Here we are looking at, does the democratic rule of law function, and is there, or are there systemic issues? It's a different scope, if you want. But were the concerns over the pushbacks expressed? Yes.
Morda še kakšno vprašanje? Ne, v tem primeru se vam lepo zahvaljujem in vas pozdravljam. Nasvidenje do prihodnjič. Hvala lepa.
Ze kunnen, ja, wacht. I think if you wish to ask questions to my colleagues, they will be available here.